Imagine being wounded in a place no one sees. In the quiet chambers of the heart where your deepest trust was betrayed, your innocence was broken, and your spirit was crushed. They hurt you and walked away. Perhaps they laughed, perhaps they were silent. But what they all believed, without exception, was that you'd never recover. They mistook your silence for defeat, your tears for weakness, your isolation for finality. But oh, how mistaken they were. Because the God who sees in secret does not abandon the broken. He works in the quiet, in the shadows, behind the veil of agony, and while they were busy forgetting you, He was busy forming you. Every tear you cried became a seed, every scar became a script written by divine hands, and every time you thought the pain would consume you, He was forging a weapon, not for revenge but for redemption. Not to destroy others, but to defend yourself and to heal others who are walking the same valley. You were not abandoned in your affliction. You were being trained, not with loud applause or public validation, but with sacred whispers that only the soul can hear. And now something is stirring, something ancient, something powerful. God is about to turn what once hurt you into what now arms you. The very blows that were meant to break you are now the blades in your arsenal. The ridicule has become your resilience. The betrayal has become your backbone. You are no longer who you were when they left, and soon they won't recognize you not because you've changed for them, but because you've changed for Him. So pause here with me, breathe, feel the power of your journey, the might in your scars, and the divine fire that is beginning to burn in you. Because your wounds, my friend, are not wasted. They are being transformed. Now let's walk through the 7 truths you need to understand if you're to rise with power from the ashes of their betrayal. God allows the wound to reveal the weapon within. The wound is not the end. It is the beginning of your awakening. When someone you trusted shatters you from the inside, the first thing you feel is not wisdom. It is not growth. It is unbearable confusion. You ask, why? Why would someone you loved, someone you gave to freely, inflict such damage? The mind searches for logic, but there is none. And so, in the absence of answers, the soul is drawn inward, into the sacred space where God speaks. This is where the journey begins, not in the act of being wounded, but in what the wound awakens. Pain forces us to stop pretending. It unmasks illusions, destroys shallow relationships, and reveals our dependency on voices that never deserved our trust. And it is here, in this holy unraveling, that something deeper is revealed. Not to the world, not even to those who hurt you, but to you. You begin to feel something stir beneath the ache, a voice that's older than your pain, a knowing that whispers, this is not the end of you. It doesn't remove the hurt, but it reveals the truth. You are not what they did to you. You are what you become through it. God never allows pain for the sake of watching you suffer. He allows it to reveal the strength you could not see before. That hidden weapon was never going to surface in comfort. The betrayal, it was the fire that softened your pride. The silence, it was the desert where your faith learned to walk. And the rejection, it made room for clarity, for calling, for courage. The wound is sacred, not because of what it took from you, but because of what it gave you. It gave you eyes that now see through deception, a spirit that senses falsehood long before words are spoken, a heart that no longer chases approval. The pain that broke you is the same pain that birthed discernment. Have you ever considered that the weapon God is forming in you is not something new, but something ancient, long buried under layers of people-pleasing, fear, and self-doubt. The wound is not about them, it's about what it unlocked. You were too entangled to see it before. You were too trusting, too soft in a world too cruel. But now, by grace, you've been sharpened. God is not forming a weapon of bitterness. He is forming a weapon of light, forged in truth, wrapped in fire. And this weapon will not only defend you, it will lead others out of the same darkness you once called home. The ones who wounded you, trained you unknowingly. They didn't know they were preparing you. When they lied, they were equipping you with a deeper sense of truth. When they manipulated, they were revealing your blind spots. When they betrayed you, they were breaking chains you didn't even know were wrapped around your soul. The irony is that the very people who tried to weaken you were, in God's divine irony, strengthening you. You see, the strongest warriors are not trained in comfort. They are trained in chaos, and the ones who brought you pain thought they were destroying you, but they were actually activating something God had long prepared in secret. Their cruelty was not the blueprint, but it became the hammer that beat your spirit into divine shape. At first, it doesn't feel like training. It feels like torment. It feels like you're losing your mind. You find yourself staring at the ceiling at 2 a.m., replaying words that cut deeper than any blade. You wonder if you'll ever feel normal again. But in the quiet aftermath of their betrayal, something begins to shift. You become more aware. You stop giving chances so easily. You listen more to what people don't say. You observe more. You ask better questions. You slow down. This is how training begins. They may have broken your heart, but they built your discernment. They may have mocked your kindness, but they triggered your inner fire. They may have walked away, but they gave you the gift of detachment. Every insult became a reminder of your worth. Every dismissal became fuel. Every abandonment became an altar where you met God more intimately than ever before. They thought they were teaching you a lesson, and they were, but not the one they intended. They taught you that your value is not in how much you give, but in how wisely you guard. They taught you not to lower your standards for the sake of inclusion. They taught you that silence is a language of the mature, and that walking away can be an act of self-respect, not weakness. Unknowingly, they handed you the sword they meant to pierce you with, but instead of bleeding, you sharpened it. You turned pain into power. You turned loneliness into leadership. You turned being used into becoming useful. For God, for yourself, for the world. They still don't know. They go about their lives thinking you're the one who lost. But the truth is, you were never losing. You were learning. God used every insult, every ghosted message, every moment of dismissal to raise you. They thought they ended something, but they were just finishing the chapter that God needed closed so the real story could begin. Healing is not a return to the old self. It's the birth of the new. So many people speak of healing as if it's a return to what once was, a reclamation of an old innocence, a patching together of what once made you feel safe. But the truth is, real healing never takes you backward. It doesn't restore you to who you were before the betrayal, before the disappointment, before the fall. No, healing transforms. It resurrects. It creates something altogether new from the fragments of what was destroyed. You are not being repaired, you are being reborn. You see who you were before they hurt you as someone trusting, perhaps even naive, open to the world in a way that left your heart vulnerable to those who did not deserve it. But who you are becoming now is forged by fire. You are learning to be wise without being bitter, to love without losing yourself, and to give without being emptied. People often look at healing as a process of forgetting, but that is far too shallow. True healing doesn't erase the memory, it redeems it. You carry the scar not as a sign of damage, but as a mark of survival. It is not a reminder of weakness, but of how you overcame. God doesn't ask you to pretend the pain didn't happen. He asks you to let it become part of your strength. That's the transformation. Do you remember the moments you were on the floor, too broken to speak, too shattered to think? In those moments, something sacred was forming, not visible to the world, not even visible to you, but deep in your soul. A new identity was taking shape. One not shaped by people's opinions, but by divine truth. You were being introduced to a stronger version of yourself, a version that knows how to stand still in storms and stay quiet when provoked, not out of weakness, but because silence has become your sword. God didn't allow the pain so you would regress. He allowed it so you would ascend. The betrayal was not meant to ruin you, but to reroute you, to pull you away from what was draining your spirit and push you toward what will ignite your purpose. You're not going back to who you were. That version of you didn't know the power you carried. That version of you thought loyalty meant self-abandonment. That version of you believed love meant losing yourself to be accepted. But now you know better, because healing has opened your eyes, and what you now see is sacred. This new you is not hardened, but refined, not distant, but discerning, not cold, but cautious. You're learning that protecting your peace is not selfish, it's sacred, that boundaries are not barriers, they are blessings, that saying no is not rejection, it's revelation. You are not healing to go back, you are healing to go forward. The people who hurt you would never recognize the new you. They still think you're stuck in the pain they caused. But what they didn't know is that while they walked away, God stayed. And while they forgot you, God rebuilt you. And what you are now becoming is something they never had the power to break. Silence was the furnace where your strength was forged. They thought your silence meant defeat. They thought your quiet withdrawal from the noise was a sign of surrender. But they didn't understand that silence in the hands of God is not emptiness. It is sacred space. It is the very furnace where strength is forged, where souls are refined, and where power is born in stillness. You were not inactive in your silence. You were being rebuilt. While others sought attention and applause, you found yourself in hiddenness. While they shouted loudly for validation, you bowed low in pain. And it was in that very place of obscurity, when no one was watching, that God began to mold you. It's easy to misunderstand the silence. In a world obsessed with noise, movement, and visibility, quietness feels like abandonment. But divine things grow in silence. Seeds don't shout when they sprout beneath the soil. They rise in stillness. And so did you. Every night you cried and said nothing, He saw. Every time you swallowed your anger instead of retaliating, He noticed. Every moment you chose dignity over revenge, He took note. Your silence was not weakness, it was worship. It was trust. It was the bold, painful act of letting God handle what your flesh wanted to fight. And something happened in that silence. You grew deeper roots. You began to see what truly matters. You stopped needing to explain yourself. You stopped chasing people who left. You stopped begging for love that had to be earned. And in that stopping, you started becoming. The silence stripped away what was shallow. It removed the voices that once distracted you. It revealed who was truly there for you and who only loved the version of you that served their needs. It cleared the room so that God could enter in fullness and do his work without interference. And while the world couldn't see it, heaven was watching. Angels were assigned. Lessons were taught. Power was given. Not the kind that shouts, but the kind that stands quietly and cannot be moved. Now, that silence has become part of your strength. You no longer react to everything. You choose your words with care. You don't chase noise, you walk in presence. You've learned that some of the most powerful victories are not won through arguments or battles, but by standing still and letting God fight for you. And those who thought you were broken because you were silent, they will soon see that silence was your sanctuary, that while they were busy talking, you were being trained. While they were flaunting their pride, you were gathering spiritual armor. While they overlooked you, God was preparing you. There is a weight to your presence now, a depth in your gaze, a calmness in your steps. You carry an unseen strength that the loudest voices cannot match. Because the silence didn't crush you, it crowned you. What they used to harm you, God is now using to bless others through you. There comes a moment when you look back on the things that almost destroyed you, and you realize they did not succeed. You are still here. But more than that, you are different. You speak with a kind of quiet authority that doesn't need explanation. You walk with a posture shaped by experience, not arrogance. You listen to others with a heart that has known pain, which is why you can truly understand theirs. And this is where something holy begins to happen. God, in his mysterious grace, begins to use the very thing that tried to break you as the foundation for your ability to help others. The same betrayal that left you shattered becomes the doorway through which you now comfort someone else. The same silence you cried through becomes the stillness that allows you to hold space for someone else's grief. You never set out to be anyone's guide. You didn't ask for the pain. You didn't volunteer to be misunderstood, overlooked, betrayed. But because you've been there, you can recognize the signs in others, the tremble in their voice, the way they avoid eye contact, the words they say that mean something deeper. You've walked that valley, and now your survival becomes their map. There's something different about those who've suffered deeply. They don't offer cliché answers. They don't rush to fix things. They sit with others in their pain. They carry presence more than words, and that, more than anything, is what the world is desperate for. People who have been through the fire and still radiate warmth. God takes what was meant for harm and turns it into healing, not just for you, but through you. And here's the part that silences the enemy. The very thing that was supposed to ruin you becomes the platform God uses to elevate you. The rejection becomes your testimony. The abuse becomes your message. The humiliation becomes your compassion. You become the person who knows how to hold another person's soul when it's unraveling, because you remember the nights when no one held yours. You don't need a pulpit to be a healer. You don't need a stage to be a voice. Your life becomes the sermon. Your scars become the ink that writes hope into someone else's hopelessness. That's the divine exchange. What they use to harm you becomes what God uses to lift others. This is why you had to survive, because someone else is still in it. Someone else is still bleeding, still believing they'll never get up again. But when they hear your voice, when they feel your spirit, something shifts. They begin to hope. They begin to believe that maybe, just maybe, they too can rise. God did not waste your pain, not a single tear. Every ache was collected. Every wound was woven into a story that now carries power. Not the kind that shouts from stages, but the kind that whispers, "You're not alone," and means it with every fiber of its being. And that is why your wounds are now weapons, not for war but for healing, not for destruction but for rescue. You were not just saved, you were chosen to help save others. The pain you carried secretly is now the platform God will use publicly. There are sorrows we speak of, and there are sorrows we keep hidden. The deepest wounds are often the ones no one knows about, the kind you cover with smiles, the kind you bury beneath busyness, the kind you try to forget because remembering is too painful. You carried this pain not because you wanted to, but because you felt you had no other choice. You didn't want to burden anyone. You didn't want to explain what even you could barely understand. But God saw, in the stillness of those lonely nights, when tears soaked your pillow and your soul begged for peace, He was there, not distant, not silent. He was collecting those tears, one by one, turning them into seeds that would one day grow into something you couldn't yet imagine. The pain that no one applauded you for enduring, that no one even noticed, is the very pain God will use to elevate you. You see, public platforms are not built on perfection. They are built on brokenness that has been transformed. The world does not need another flawless voice. It needs someone who has wrestled in silence and found God faithful, someone who doesn't preach theory, but who breathes experience. And you, through your silent suffering, have become that person. There was a time you thought your pain disqualified you, that because you had moments of weakness, confusion, even doubt, you were unworthy of anything greater. But that's where you were wrong. God doesn't choose the polished, He chooses the crushed. Because only the crushed can carry oil. Only the pressed can pour out healing. Only the hidden can be trusted to carry power without pride. That pain you kept buried is not buried anymore. God is bringing it to the surface, not to shame you, but to shine through you. He's turning your mourning into a message, your heartbreak into a haven for others, your confusion into clarity that will guide someone else out of the fog. And this is how you will rise, not with noise, but with undeniable presence. People won't understand it at first. They'll say you came out of nowhere. But what they don't know is that you've been in preparation for years, in the shadows, in the silence, in the sacred place of suffering. The platform God is building for you will not be built by man's approval. It will be built on divine authority, on the quiet faithfulness of someone who kept walking when they had every reason to quit, on the humility of someone who knows what it feels like to be overlooked and therefore never overlooks anyone. You don't need to promote yourself. Your story will speak, your healing will echo, and your voice, once silenced by pain, will now carry the sound of victory, not because you never broke, but because God picked up every shattered piece and created something holy. There is a reason God let your pain be private, because now your rise will be public, and when it happens, no one will be able to deny that it was Him who did it. The weapon God forms in you is not for vengeance, it's for victory. When you've been hurt deeply, it's natural to imagine the moment of justice, the day they feel the weight of what they did, the hour they come back to apologize, the time when the scales are finally balanced. But while these thoughts echo through the halls of the wounded soul, God whispers something different, something higher. You weren't forged in the fire to destroy, you were forged to lead. The weapon God is forming in you is not one that slices through flesh or spirit with cruelty. It is not vengeance wrapped in righteousness. It is not retaliation dressed in spiritual language. No, the weapon God gives you is sharper and holier than that. It is the weapon of clarity, the weapon of discernment, the weapon of peace that cannot be provoked, the weapon of stillness that shakes the foundations of those who thrive on chaos. There's a reason God didn't allow you to lash out. There's a reason He held you in silence when your flesh wanted to scream. It wasn't because you were powerless. It was because He was preserving your power for something far more significant. Vengeance is loud, short-lived, and empty. But victory, it's quiet, lasting, and full. You don't need to prove anything to those who hurt you. You don't need to revisit the battlefield to announce that you've survived. When God lifts you, when He transforms the ashes of your pain into the oil of purpose, your life becomes its own message. Your peace becomes your sword. Your joy becomes your shield. Your refusal to hate becomes your greatest defense. You see, God never asked you to become like them. He never told you to trade your softness for spite or your compassion for calculation. He allowed the pain not so you would become bitter, but so you would become brave. And the weapon He's forming in you is one that changes the world by first changing you. This weapon is not forged in bitterness, it's forged in understanding. It's formed in the fire but cooled by grace. You become a vessel that no longer seeks to hurt but to heal. You carry fire in your eyes, but tenderness in your words. You walk into rooms with the authority of someone who has suffered and survived. And those who thought you were weak will not recognize this strength. Because it's not the strength of the world. It's not loud, boastful, or arrogant. It's rooted, steady, sure. It's the kind of strength that cannot be stolen or shaken, because it wasn't built by man, it was built by God. You are not rising with revenge, you are rising with revelation. The pain they caused no longer owns you. It no longer dictates your story. It has become part of your training, but not your identity. You are not what happened to you. You are what God did with it, and what He is doing now is mighty. So here you stand, not broken but born anew, not bitter but burning with divine strength. You are not the same person they left behind. You have walked through fire and come out refined, not ruined. They hurt you and thought you'd never heal. They walked away believing their actions would be the final chapter. But they forgot something. God writes the endings. And God, who saw your hidden tears, who heard the prayers you couldn't speak, who stood guard over your heart in the midnight hours, is now lifting you, not just for your sake, but for every soul who has ever suffered in silence, who has ever bled behind smiles, who has ever believed they were too broken to be used. You are the proof that pain can become purpose. You are the evidence that wounds can be turned into weapons, not for destruction, but for deliverance. Your life will testify that even when the world forgets, God remembers. Even when others dismiss, God defends. Even when they give up on you, God begins again. This is not your downfall, this is your rise. This is not your punishment, this is your preparation. What they did was real, but what God is doing is greater, and soon all will see, not because you shouted, but because you stood. Let them wonder, let them watch. You don't need revenge. Because your healing is loud enough, because your peace is proof enough, because your life, now touched by the hand of God, is the sharpest weapon of all. And you, my dear friend, are no longer wounded. You are armed.